Hey guys, it's me. I'm back with Jacqueline Woodson's Harbor Me. All right. So, just so everybody knows and everybody that's watching, which is no one, so there's that. I'm going to start doing these as a read aloud during class time. I still haven't decided if I'm going to do them and post them over the break or not. My hair really is just crazy today. But I am going to read today. All right. Because I want to know. I like it. All right. So, what happened last time? Remember, when you forget where you left off, you need to go back and skim to get an idea of where you were at. Haley and Holly were going to go get their hair done up at Holly's house. Holly's mom apparently takes her every Friday and does her hair for her. We also learned that Haley is, she's of mixed races, so she is half black, half white, or maybe Puerto Rican. So she's got her dad's flaming red hair, but she has like really kinky, coarse hair, right? So it has to be worked differently, as we all know. So she goes and gets her hair done because her uncle doesn't know how to do it, which I thought was just really cute. I thought that was cute. All right. The day my uncle told me how my mother died, I was 6 years old. It was winter, and we were in a park. There was a covered slide that wound around like a snake, sending kids flying through a dark tunnel. Lots of kids landed so hard their parents carried them away in tears, but not me. I loved everything about that slide. The steep metal stairs that led to the top of it, the way you had to stand above it so that you could slip yourself in legs first, the way your body seemed to get snatched away, pulled through the darkness, then back into the bright light of winter. My uncle calls it the one time, the one way you can do something again and again and again, and then the one time something goes all kinds of wrong. I had climbed to the top of the slide and slid my legs through. The tunnel sucked me into its darkness, and I was happy, and I happy screamed my way to the bottom. The park was nearly empty, but that day, as I sailed through the tunnel, another kid raced towards the slide on a scooter. He was a big kid and thick as a wall. My uncle saw it before I did, the kid coming towards the slide, me speeding through, then coming out into the light just as the kid sped past. We landed in a pile of banging heads, cracking bones, and blood. Through the pain, dizziness, and my own screaming, I could hear my uncle calling my name, telling me to stay awake. His voice was deep and ragged and filled with so much sadness. It registered through my pain. But then my uncle wasn't calling my name. He was calling out to Barry. Barry, he said, Barry, please be okay. Barry was my mother's name, short for Burrell, short for Burrell Lee. Then my uncle was untangling me from the mess of screaming boy and spinning wheels. Through the haze of everything, I could see surprised looks on people's faces. I could hear the boy crying, could see a woman kneeling down to hug him. You're good, Barry, my uncle said again and again. You're going to live. You're going to be okay. It was my first and only time in an ambulance. I don't know how it got there, but I was inside of it, the sirens blaring, my uncle's ragged voice, the bright lights, and something else. A paramedic, maybe, moving around us. On the way to the hospital, I tried to tell him I wasn't Barry, but the pain in my arm and head made it too hard to form words. And somewhere between the park and the hospital, I must have passed out. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room, and it was dark out. My arm was in a cast from my shoulder to my wrist, and there was a thick bandage over my ear. 16 stitches behind your ear, my uncle said, bending forward to kiss the top of my head. You're a soldier in the army of sliding board catastrophes. I'm not Barry, I said. It hurt to talk. The words pounded against my head. My uncle leaned closer. You're not very what, sweetie? No, I said, my words coming out quiet and slow. I'm not Barry. You called me Barry before. The cast was heavy and tight. There were lights flashing on the wall and doctors being paged over an intercom. The room smelled like the alcohol prep pads my uncle kept in the medicine cabinet. You called me Barry, I said, but I'm Haley. My uncle was sitting in a chair right next to me. He leaned back and blinked until tears appeared. He wiped them away with his other hand, and then he blinked again. Beryl, he said. That's what we called Beryl. My mom? I tried to sit up, but it felt like somebody's huge hand was pushing me back down. He kissed the top of my head again, then leaned his cheek against it. I was so scared, he said. I was scared, like I was the night she died. My uncle and I had 2 rules: no lying, no dodging. If either one of us asked a question, the rule was the other person had to answer it. They couldn't try to dodge around it or change the subject. That's how wars happen, my uncle said, and family wars, too. How did she die, I asked. Car accident, my uncle said. When you were 3. You don't remember any of it? He sounded surprised. I remember she would sing to me, I said, a song about summertime. My uncle got quiet. He had been gently rubbing my head, but he stopped. I wanted him to keep doing it. It was a song about summertime, I said again. I was sleepy and my head was hurting again. Am I going to have to sleep here? Just tonight, my uncle said. He was sounding choky again. My mouth was hot and dry. My uncle got me a glass of water and helped me take a few small sips. The pain shooting through my arm hurt like crazy, hot and sharp as a flame. That big kid broke my clothes and my arm, I said. He didn't mean it. I know. We listened to the hospital sounds without saying anything. Somebody was calling for Dr. Somebody, a kid was crying somewhere, a nurse ran past my room. Will my dad always be in prison? I asked sleepily. Not always. But when he comes home, can I still live with you? We've got time to figure it out, Hales. I pulled his hand back to my head. He rubbed it until I fell asleep. It's kind of crazy to think, right? Like her mom's been dead since she was 3. Dad's been in jail for a really long time. And so the uncle's like the only person she knows. So when dad gets out of jail, right, does that mean that like the one person she knows, like she won't live with anymore? It's kind of crazy. It's hard, right? But it's probably the reality. Chapter 20. By mid-November, it had gotten colder. The school cranked the heat up a notch, and the radiator hissing got louder. We were all sweating, but Ashton kept the scarf he'd been wearing all day wrapped around his neck. Now, do you remember how she was driving with Holly, and they saw Ashton and a bunch of boys were picking on him, and they were doing a thing called necking, which is when somebody pops you on the back of the neck. And so she was commenting on how, like, he used to have, like, red marks on his neck, and now she knew why. So I'm wondering with that scarf around his neck, if that's part of it. The day before, he'd worn a turtleneck under his uniform shirt. He had moved his desk and was sitting outside the circle, far away from Amari. But they kept looking at each other like there was something they wanted to say, and couldn't. I took out my recorder and started to turn it on. I don't want you recording me, Ashton said. Then don't say anything, Holly said before I could talk. The week before, she had brought her knitting needles and a ball of purple yarn to school. She sat there, the needles clicking over themselves, the purple square of yarn growing more rectangular. Her grandmother had taught her to knit before she died. I had only met her once. She was tall and dark brown with silver white hair. She had died 3 years ago in December, and every year, as December got closer, Holly started knitting. She said she didn't like knitting that much, but it reminded her of her grandmother. By April, the needles would be gone again. Ashton got quiet. Don't have to record anybody today, I said. It's not a big deal. I mean, I want to be remembered like everybody else, Ashton said. He kept his eyes on the arm of his desk, tracing circles into it with the thumb and pointer finger. And I don't want it to at the same time. I don't get it, Ashton, Amari said, annoyed. He was drawing in a sketchbook. I could see what it was because, as usual, he had left it. I couldn't see what it was because, see, it didn't make sense to me, so I went back and reread it. I corrected what I was reading, right? I couldn't see what it was because, as usual, he had his left arm curving over the picture. There was a pack of colored markers by his elbow. Either you do or you don't. Ashton looked right at him. I don't want to be remembered for saying the wrong thing. Miss Laverne said we can't say anything wrong here, that everything we say is okay and nobody's judging us, Esteban said. Amari said a curse word, then looked up with a cheesy grin. See? No lightning struck me, he said, going back to his drawing. I can't say stuff like how much this gun thing sucks, Ashton said. But I mean, does everything have to be about black versus white? I mean, what if people just stopped talking about racism? Wouldn't it just go away? Look at us all sitting here. Everybody is everything, and we're all together. And nobody's fighting or being mean to each other. Amari stopped drawing and shook his head. You just don't get it. I do too get it, Ashton said. I didn't even think about being white until the first time I met you, Amari. You asked me if I was an albino. I bet you don't even remember. I remember, Amari said. I didn't even know what an albino was, Ashton said. He pushed his hair away from his forehead. And that's the problem, Amari said. Like I said, you just don't get it. That's not fair, Amari. I didn't get it. But I knew I didn't like the way it sounded, and I was mad because I thought you guys were laughing at me. We didn't even know you, Amari said. Why would we be laughing at you? Why would you think that was what kind of kids we were? Because kids are like that, Ashton said. Not all kids. Not us. The room got so quiet. I think even the hissing of the radiator stopped. Even Holly's needles stopped clicking. I know you guys aren't like that, Ashton said. He looked at Amari. You remember what I said back when you asked if I was an albino? Yeah, Amari nodded. You were like, no, are you? And then I said, how am I going to be albino and be black, like I am? Amari went back to his drawing, and he was smiling a little. Of course I remember that day, he said. I don't know if you remember this part, though. Amari looked up at him again. What part? You said to me, we cool though, bruh. It's all good. I'm Amari. And the way your voice sort of just dropped down into something so, I don't know. Dude, it was so friendly. He pointed to his chest. I felt myself choking up inside. For some reason, when you said that, I missed everything we left in Connecticut a little bit less. You know, our house, our street, my grandma, my school, my friends, all of us. It didn't feel so hard right then. Just because you'd said, it's all good. I'm Amari. Yeah, Amari said, I remember that. Of course I remember that. You do? Yeah, that's when me and you became friends. Yeah, Ashton said. I know. They looked at each other, and it was like they had left us, like they had gone back to that day when they were little kids and were standing in the schoolyard with the September light shining down on them and kids running all around. The sound of the flag flickering in the wind above them. It's all good. I'm Amari. Were the words raining down over them like snow, like soft and welcoming snow. Chapter 21. I've got some more stuff I wanted to say, Ashton told us. Haley, I don't care if you record this part. I turned the recorder on. Esteban was sitting on the ledge of the window watching us, watching all of us. Holly got up and squeezed in beside him. He moved over a bit, making space for her. Ashton slowly started unwrapping the scarf from around his neck. On one side, we could see finger marks where somebody had necked him so hard they had left the remainder of their own hand. I swallowed. There are a bunch of kids who aren't very nice here, Ashton said. The ones that call me Casper and Wonder Bread and Ghost Boy and Paleface and other names I don't even want to say. Amari looked up and his eyes turned to slits. Means like, who did that to you? Ashton shrugged. Nah, man, tell me. Who did that? Yeah, Tiago said. Who did that to you? Some 8th graders, Ashton whispered. I don't know them. They just do it to be stupid, for laughs. You can be stupid and laugh without hitting somebody, Amari said. That's messed up. I know. Ashton gently touched his own neck. Not like I can do or say something about it. It's just what happens. Like the way kids laugh at us sometimes in the cafeteria, right? We don't care. I care, Holly said. I know I shouldn't, but I do. Me too, Tiago said. I hate it. Yeah, but if we say something, we're just going to laugh. They're just going to laugh harder. This part's kind of making me sad, right? It's an idea of... Sorry, I have a piece of hair on my tongue. It's that idea that kind of being powerless, don't have any control over something. These big kids are picking on him and bullying him, right? And they've also already been like pulled out, right? These 6 kids have been pulled out of their classroom from the general education classroom, gen ed class, and put into another class. And there was a point earlier in the book where somebody said it was like these were the slow kids, right? Which they're not. They just learn differently. So it seems like Ashton's feeling pretty powerless about a lot of things, right? And I'm wondering if he's really upset about this idea of the gun, right? That he can have a privilege because he's white that his friends can't have. And he seems really upset about it. And I'm wondering if it's because it's something he can't control. He can't control the color of his skin, right? And he can't control the fact that he's different than his friends. And that's got to be a really hard feeling. And I just want to sit with that feeling for a second and think about that, right? Turn on that empathy lens, like what it's like for him, as well as everybody else, because his experience is very different. Ashton was right. We were different, but most days we believed Miss Laverne when she told us how special we were, how smart, how kind, how beautiful, how tons of successful people had different ways of learning. But some days it got us, inside us, like now. Where'd they get you, bruh? Amari asked. Ashton shrugged. Outside the schoolyard. We all got quiet again. You know how in the middle of the yard there's that huge flagpole? Ashton said. And up at the very top there's the flag. He looked at each one of us, and we all nodded. Well, on that first day I got here, I stared up at that flag thinking, this is happening all over America. All over America, kids were walking into schoolyards and classrooms, and American flag was waving. All over America, kids were saying the Pledge of Allegiance, saying, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. All over America, we had memorized this. But did anybody know what it meant? Nah, Amari said, not really, not back then. I didn't either, Ashton said, but it gave us a sameness. I stood in the schoolyard, looking up at that flag, and I felt something. Not just like a new kid, not just like a white kid, but like I was a part of everything running and jumping and playing all over America, not just in our schoolyard. I mean everywhere. I know, right? Holly said. Like thousands and thousands of kids all over the country got decked out in their new school clothes and were all excited for the first day of school. Yeah, Ashton said, like that. But on my first day here, almost every kid seemed to be some shade of brown. I had never seen so many brown and black people. His voice faltered, like he wasn't sure if he was saying it right this time. So many African Americans. And Latinos, Tiago said, don't forget about us. Man, you brown, Amari said. He already mentioned you. Light brown, Holly said. Light brown. I'm not saying anything to be racist, Ashton said. It's just what I remember. I never even thought about my color till that day, before I ever even met you, Amari. It felt like everybody was staring at me. Lucky you, Holly said. How's that lucky? Because every single body in this room except you had to think about themselves that way already, like way before now. The way you felt, like you were on the outside of everything, like you weren't a part of it, well, that's the way a whole lot of people feel every day. Amari and Esteban nodded. It's true, Tiago said. Like the way people sometimes look at me just because I have an accent. And like Amari with the guns, and like Esteban with his papi. Everybody. Even me, I said. The first thing people see is my hair. Then they see my skin. Then they ask, what are you? Holly said. You got the white pass, Ashton. Until now. I hear you, Ashton said. But I never asked for a white pass. You didn't have to, Holly said. But all I can say is, welcome home. Ashton looked confused until Holly smiled. You're one of us now. Ashton leaned back in his chair and slowly he smiled. Yeah, he said. I'm one of us now. Club Us, Amari said. The membership requirements are kind of messed up, but whatever. Question though, Tiago said. Why'd your family come all the way here from Connecticut anyway? The one time my family went to Connecticut, it was a whole bunch of hours. It took us a whole bunch of hours. It was pretty, but I'm not trying to be driving for that long. My mom wouldn't let us play video games. She was like, no, we're going to listen to audiobooks for hours. So not fair, Amari said. What are you talking about? Holly said. You like to read, Amari. You read all the time except when you come here. Then you draw. But in class, I always see you with your book. Yeah, I know that. You act like that's news. Then what are you saying? I didn't say anything about reading. I'm telling the brother it's messed up because you can play a video game and listen to a book. You don't have to stare out the window. These are two different senses. That's what's up, Tiago said. That's what I tried to tell my mom. See? Amari rolled his eyes at Holly. Miss Know-It-All thinks she knows it all. But I'm with Tiago, Amari said. Why'd your peeps come all the way from Connecticut to BK? That's Brooklyn. When my dad lost his job in Connecticut, Ashton said, a friend he knew from college gave him a job managing a key food in Brooklyn. I didn't even know what a key food was. I guess there's some in Connecticut, but not where we lived. Welcome to Brooklyn, Amari said. We're glad you landed here. That day, I remembered all of us in art room leaning in towards each other. But what is frozen in my mind even more than that is later that same day. Ashton, Amari, Esteban, and Tiago left the school together, walking 4 across. So close that their shoulders were touching. Me and Holly walked behind them, a double wall against the Neckers, who were waiting right outside the schoolyard. 3 tall 8th graders who glared at Ashton, but walked backward, away from the 6 of us. 3 tall 8th graders who looked from Amari to Tiago to Esteban to Ashton, then kept looking to me and Holly, then turned and walked quickly, really quickly, away from all of us. The end. Just kidding. And for right now. That's pretty powerful, right? Ashton was getting bullied outside of his class, right? And people were hurting him, and his friends came together and they put aside their differences to support one another, and they came out as a united front. I think it's really important that they recognize, right? Like these guys all recognize that something is different about them, but they are honoring that. it does make a connection for me when I was teasing you guys about seeing you in person, right? And one of my teasings was that, and I shouldn't tease you, but one of my teasings was that how delightfully awkward you all are, right? Like everybody's a little bit shy and nervous and didn't really know what to say, and it was kind of uncomfortable and awkward. And I was delighted by it. I love it because I'm awkward. You guys know that. And so I can see myself in you a lot when that happens. But I love. My friend Mila was like, "That's me, right? Like that's who I am." And yeah, it is who you are. And I love that you guys are able to recognize that within each other, and it combines you, and you find power in that and friendship in that, and which is why you guys are making friends all across the classroom right now. So it's just wonderful, and I love that. So from one awkward girl to a group of awkward people, have a great night tonight, guys. All right.